It was a Tuesday morning when my phone rang. I was sitting in my beat-up van outside a hardware store in downtown Manhattan, drinking coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The number was private. I almost didn't pick up. "Is this Marcus Hale, the electrician?" The voice on the other end was smooth, calm, and carried the kind of confidence that only comes from never having to worry about money. "Yeah, that's me. What do you need?" "I need someone discreet. I was told you're good with your hands and better with your mouth shut." I raised an eyebrow. "Who gave you my number?" "Danny Kowalski. He said you rewired his restaurant last year and never talked about what you saw in the back kitchen." Danny. Of course. I had walked in on 3 guys counting cash into bags that night and had walked right back out without a word. Old habit. In this city, you learn fast that some things are better left unseen. "What's the job?" I asked. "A chandelier. 3rd floor sitting room. It keeps flickering. My housekeeper is nervous about it." "Simple enough. Address." She gave me one on 5th Avenue. The kind of address that makes your jaw tighten a little. I wrote it down on the back of a receipt and told her I'd be there by noon. I showed up at 11:45 because I was raised to be early. The building was one of those old pre-war limestone towers with a doorman in a coat that probably cost more than my van. He looked me up and down, checked a clipboard, and nodded without smiling. "Mr. Hale, Ms. Voss is expecting you. 42nd floor." 42nd. I had never been that high up in a private residence. I stepped into an elevator lined with dark wood paneling and mirrors. The doors closed silently. I looked at my reflection. Jeans, work boots, a canvas jacket with a small burn mark on the left sleeve from a job 3 weeks ago. I looked exactly like what I was. A working man in a place built for people who didn't work with their hands. The doors opened directly into the apartment. No hallway. No waiting room. Just space. Enormous, quiet, golden space. The ceilings were maybe 14 feet high and every surface was either marble, glass, or something that looked too expensive to touch. Through the far windows, Central Park stretched out like a green carpet laid at the feet of the city. A woman walked toward me from across the room. She was in her late 40s, maybe early 50s, with dark hair pulled back neatly and eyes the color of deep water. She wore a simple white blouse and dark trousers and no jewelry except a thin watch on her wrist. Everything about her was controlled, measured, like she had long ago decided exactly how much of herself she would show to the world and not a fraction more. "Mr. Hale." She extended her hand. "I'm Elena Voss." I shook it. Firm grip. "Marcus, where's the chandelier?" She smiled slightly, as if she appreciated that I skipped the small talk. She led me through 2 rooms and up a wide staircase to the 3rd floor. The sitting room was smaller than the rest of the apartment but still larger than my entire apartment in Queens. In the center of the ceiling hung a chandelier that probably weighed more than I did. Crystal drops, brass fittings, 12 individual bulbs arranged in a spiral pattern. One of them was flickering. Just barely. A slow, irregular pulse. "It started 3 days ago," Elena said. "The housekeeper thinks it's a ghost." "It's not a ghost," I said. I set down my bag and looked up. "It's a loose connection. Maybe a failing dimmer switch. I'll need to check the wiring in the fixture and trace it back to the panel." "Take whatever time you need." She left me to work. I set up my ladder and climbed up to the chandelier. It was fine craftsmanship, old European style, probably brought over from somewhere and installed at enormous cost. I unscrewed the housing cap and found the wiring inside. Just as I suspected, one of the wire nuts had worked itself loose over time. The connection was intermittent. Every time the building shifted slightly or someone walked heavily across the floor above, the wire would lose contact for a split second and the bulb would flicker. Simple fix. I tightened the connection, wrapped it properly, and tested it. The flickering stopped. I was climbing down when I heard voices from another room. Not loud, not arguing, But tense in the way that conversations are tense when the people having them are trying very hard not to raise their voices. I couldn't hear the words, but I heard the tone. One voice was Elena's. The other was a man's. Low, insistent, pressing something she wasn't giving. I packed up my bag slowly. Not to eavesdrop. Just because I wasn't in a hurry and the job was done and I didn't want to interrupt something that wasn't my business. In this city you develop a sense for when to disappear and when to stay still. The man's voice stopped. A door closed somewhere. Elena appeared in the doorway of the sitting room. She looked exactly the same as before. Not a hair moved. Not a single flicker of whatever had just happened showed on her face. All done? She asked. All done, I said. Loose wire. It won't bother you again. She nodded and reached into the pocket of her trousers. She pulled out a small envelope and held it out to me. I took it without opening it. There's extra in there, she said. For the discretion. I looked at her. I'm just an electrician, Ms. Voss. I fix what's broken and I go home. She held my gaze for a moment longer than necessary. Yes, she said quietly. That's exactly why I called you. I took the elevator back down. In the lobby I opened the envelope. There were $500 bills inside. My usual rate for a job like that was $80. I stood there holding the envelope and I thought about the voice I had heard upstairs. Low and insistent. The way a man sounds when he wants something and is used to getting it. I put the money in my jacket pocket and walked out into the afternoon sun. I should have left it there. I should have driven back to Queens, made dinner, watched the game, and forgotten the whole thing. That's what the smart version of me would have done. But something about Elena Voss stayed with me. Not the apartment, not the money. The way she had said that's exactly why I called you. Like she had been looking for someone specific. Like the chandelier was never really the point. My phone rang again at 7 that evening. Same private number. Mr. Hale, are you free tomorrow? I went back the next morning. She met me herself at the elevator again. This time there was no pretense of a fixture to repair. Come in, she said. I'll make coffee. We sat at a long kitchen table that could have seated 12. She poured coffee from a French press and sat across from me and folded her hands on the table like a woman about to make a presentation she had rehearsed a dozen times. I want to be honest with you, she said. There's no other electrical work. I figured, I said. The man you may have heard yesterday. His name is Richard Carver. He's a business partner, or was. We built something together 11 years ago. A logistics company. It grew larger than either of us expected. Now he wants to restructure the ownership in a way that would effectively remove me from my own company. I wrapped both hands around my coffee cup. Ms. Voss, I'm an electrician. I know what you are, she said. And I know what you're not. You're not connected to my world. You don't have a stake in my company. You don't owe anyone in my circle anything. You have no reason to lie to me or manipulate me or pretend to be on my side while feeding information to Richard. I looked at her. You think everyone around you is compromised. I know they are. My lawyer went to law school with Richard. My financial advisor plays golf with him every Sunday. My assistant of 6 years sent him a summary of a private meeting I had last month. I found out 2 weeks ago. She said that last part without visible emotion, but her knuckles were white against the coffee cup. What do you want from me? I asked. Information, she said. Richard is having a meeting this Friday at a property he owns in New Jersey. An old manor house he uses for private gatherings. I believe he is meeting with 2 board members of our company and a lawyer who specializes in hostile corporate restructuring. I believe they are going to finalize a legal strategy to force me out. I need to know what is said in that meeting. I sat back. You want me to bug the room. I want you to install a listening device in a room where a private meeting will be held. Yes, that's illegal. Many things are. I looked at her for a long moment. She didn't look away. She wasn't embarrassed by what she was asking. She wasn't apologetic. She had thought this through and decided it was necessary, and she was telling me clearly and directly, which I had to admit was more respect than most people show when they're asking someone to do something wrong. Why would I do this? I said. Because I will pay you well. Because Richard Carver is not a good man, and what he is doing to me he has done before to others who couldn't fight back. And because I think you understand what it feels like to work hard at something and have someone with more power try to take it from you. I didn't answer that. She wasn't wrong, but I didn't like that she could read it in me. How would I even get inside the property? I said finally, and she understood that meant I was at least still listening. She slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs of the manor house, floor plans, a schedule, and a document on the letterhead of a property management company indicating that a licensed electrician was scheduled to inspect the backup generator and outbuilding wiring on Thursday afternoon, one day before the meeting. I own the property management company, she said simply. The appointment is legitimate. You'll have full access to the property. The meeting will be held in the study on the ground floor. I need whatever is said in that room between 2 and 4 in the afternoon on Friday. I looked at the floor plans. The study was clearly marked. Corner room, 2 windows, 1 interior door. I need 3 days to think about it, I said. You have 1. I drove home. I sat in my apartment and I looked at my ceiling and I thought about a lot of things. I thought about my father, who had worked 30 years in a machine shop only to have the pension gutted when the company was restructured by men in suits who had never touched a machine in their lives. I thought about Elena Voss and the way her voice had stayed completely level when she talked about finding out her assistant had betrayed her. I thought about Richard Carver, whoever he was, insistent and low-voiced in a room I couldn't see. I called her back at 10 that night. I'll do the Thursday inspection, I said. I'll handle the generator. Legitimate work. While I'm there I'll assess the study. I'm not promising anything beyond that. That's enough for now, she said. Thursday came. I drove out to New Jersey in my van with my tools and my work order on the property management letterhead. The caretaker at the manor was a heavy-set man named Lou who shook my hand and showed me around without much interest. He was more focused on the sports radio station playing from a small speaker in his jacket pocket than on anything I was doing. The generator was in a stone outbuilding at the back of the property. I spent 90 minutes on it. Legitimate work. The thing needed cleaning and one of the automatic transfer switches had a worn contact. I fixed it properly because that's what I do. Lou walked me through the main house briefly to show me the breaker panel in the utility room. On the way we passed the study. The door was open. I glanced in without stopping. Corner room as shown on the plans. Wood paneling. A large desk. A conference table with 6 chairs, bookshelves along 2 walls. High ceiling with an ornate plaster molding along the edge. Plaster molding. The kind with a small hollow channel running behind the decorative ridge. The kind where a very small wireless transmitter could sit completely invisible behind the lip of the design and transmit clearly to a receiver in a vehicle parked on a public road 100 meters away. I noted it and kept walking. That evening I sat in my van outside a parking lot and thought about lines. There are lines you cross and then you're on the other side and you can't come back. I had stayed on my side of most lines my whole life. Not out of perfect virtue. Out of a practical understanding that once you start bending toward the people who operate in the gray, you start becoming useful to them in ways that don't stop. But I also thought about Elena Voss, whose own company was being taken from her by men who had the lawyers and the connections and the money to do it quietly and legally and without anyone ever calling it what it was. I called her. The molding in the study, I said. It's hollow behind the ridge on the north wall. A pause. Can you access it from outside without entering the room? The utility room shares a wall. There's a chase for the old steam pipes. If the molding runs continuous, yes. Another pause. Then, Marcus, I need to ask you directly. Will you do this? I stared through my windshield at the dark parking lot. Tell me one thing first, I said. What are you going to do with what you hear? Use it to protect what I built, she said. Nothing more. And if what you hear is bad enough, what Carver is planning, then I go to my own lawyers with information they can work from. I fight it legally. I win or I lose, but at least I fight it with real information instead of guessing. It wasn't a perfect answer, but it was an honest one. I'll be there Friday morning, I said. Early. Before anyone arrives. I arrived at the manor at 6:15 Friday morning. Lou didn't open the gate until 7, so I sat in my van on the road and watched the mist come off the fields around the property. It was a quiet morning. The kind that makes you think the world is simpler than it is. Lou let me in without questions. I had called ahead and told him I needed to check something on the breaker panel that I had noticed the day before. He didn't care. He handed me a coffee in a paper cup and went back to his radio. I worked in the utility room for 20 minutes on nothing in particular, keeping the sounds of legitimate work going, tools on metal, panel door opening and closing. Then I found the pipe chase behind the north wall. It was narrow, barely enough room for my arm. But the molding was continuous and the hollow channel behind the ridge ran all the way from the utility room wall into the study. I worked carefully and quietly. The device was small, smaller than a matchbox. It pressed into the channel snugly and the lip of the molding covered it completely. From inside the study it was invisible. From anywhere outside the property it was invisible. I tested the signal on my phone through the paired app. Clear. Steady. I packed up my tools, told Lou I'd found what I was looking for on the panel and fixed it, shook his hand, and drove my van down the road to a small turnout behind a stand of trees where I had a clear signal and a thermos of coffee and 4.5 hours to wait. The cars arrived just after 1:30. 3 of them. A black sedan, a silver SUV, and a dark blue car I didn't recognize. Through my side mirror I watched figures walk toward the manor entrance. I couldn't see faces from here. At 2:04 the audio came through. I won't pretend it wasn't strange, sitting in a van on a country road listening to men talk in a room I wasn't in. The voices were clear. 4 of them. Richard Carver spoke most. He had a precise, unhurried voice in the manner of someone who had conducted many such meetings and never once left one feeling he had lost. What they said over the next 90 minutes was detailed and specific and deeply revealing. The plan was not simply to restructure the ownership. It was to manufacture a documented record of executive mismanagement attributed to Elena. False documentation. A series of backdated internal communications that would be presented to the full board as evidence that she had made several significant operational decisions without board approval, decisions that had cost the company money, decisions that could justify removal for cause. Removal for cause. That was the mechanism. Because Elena's shareholder agreement included a clause that allowed her equity stake to be bought out at a reduced valuation in the event of removal for cause. At reduced valuation, meaning they would take her company and pay her a fraction of what it was worthwhile doing it. One of the other voices, presumably a board member, asked about the documentation. Was it solid? Would it hold under scrutiny? Carver said it would hold under any scrutiny they were likely to face because the lawyer handling the documentation had experience with exactly this type of reconstruction and had done it twice before in other transactions without challenge. I sat very still in my van and listened to all of it. At 3:47 the voices quieted. The meeting was ending. I heard chairs moving, a door, footsteps. Then something I didn't expect. Footsteps returning. One set. The door closing again. And then Richard Carver's voice, alone in the room, speaking quietly. Not into a phone. Not to a person. Almost to himself, or to the room. The way a man speaks when he thinks he is completely alone and the performance is finally over. He said, "She never should have trusted me." Just that. 7 words. Then the footsteps left again and the room was silent. I sat with those words. For a long time. I called Elena that evening. I drove to a diner in a town I had never been to before and I called her from a corner booth and I played her the recording through the phone. I heard her breathing change when they described the false documentation. By the time it was finished she was quiet for almost a full minute. He admitted it to himself, she said finally. In that room alone. He said she never should have trusted me. Yes. Another silence. He's right, she said. I shouldn't have. But I did. And now I know exactly what he built. What are you going to do? I'm going to call a lawyer I hired 6 months ago specifically because Richard has never heard of her. She practices in a different city. She has no connection to anyone in my world. And I'm going to give her everything I have. The recording isn't admissible, I said. I know. But the documentation they're fabricating has to come from somewhere. Real files, real systems, real people who touched it. My lawyer will know what to look for now that I know what to look for. The recording isn't evidence. It's a map. I thought about that. A map. Yes. I don't need the recording to win. I need to know where to dig. And now I know. We were quiet for a moment. The diner was nearly empty. A waitress refilled my coffee without asking. Marcus, Elena said. What you did. I won't pretend it was straightforward. It wasn't. Are you all right with it? I thought about my father. About 30 years and a gutted pension. About men in suits who restructure things and call it business. Ask me in a year, I said. She almost laughed. It was the closest I had heard her come to it. I'll pay you. Don't. I said. Whatever you were going to say. Don't. The generator work was the job. That's what I'll invoice. A pause. All right. One more thing. I said. Yes. When this is over. When your lawyer has done what she needs to do and Carver is looking at what he built coming apart. I want you to think about your assistant. The one who sent him the meeting summary. What about her? She's probably scared of him. People do things when they're scared that they wouldn't do otherwise. I'm not saying forgive her. I'm saying before you decide what to do with her, find out why. Silence. Longer this time. That's a surprisingly gentle thing to say, Elena said. For a man who just installed a listening device in a private room. I contain multitudes, I said. This time she did laugh. Brief, quiet, real. The first unguarded thing I had heard from her. I drove home that night through the city. The lights came up as I crossed the bridge, 10,000 windows bright against the dark, all those lives running parallel to mine without touching. I thought about what a strange few days it had been. I thought about how nothing in my life had prepared me for any of it and somehow I had managed it anyway. 6 months later I got a message from a private number I recognized. 3 words. We won. Thank you. I read it twice. Put my phone back in my pocket. Finished my coffee. Then I called the next client on my list, a man in Brooklyn with a faulty outlet in his garage, and drove across the bridge into an ordinary morning and went back to being exactly what I had always been. An electrician, who fixes what's broken, and goes home.